think after you're gone, when I realize that
let's go. Warm welcome to UID team. This is such a view. This is a very special moment for us. I think we might get feedback now. It's like everything or many of the things that we're really passionate about here at UID coming together in one moment, in one room. We have students graduating, we have guests coming in, we have conversations about design, and we just have this beautiful moment together. So I'm Johan Redström, and I'm the rector here. And a special welcome also to you graduating students. Welcome to the light at the end of the tunnel. I'm not suggesting that the process is somewhat a dark one, but I mean, the winters can be a bit dark up here. I'm thinking about a different kind of tunnel, actually. So for months now, you've heard people like us telling you, you need to focus. You need to find what's really important and stay with it. You need to find a red thread and hold on to it. Focus, make your priorities right, and most likely you'll be telling yourself and each other this as well. So you come to a point now where the project you've been working on basically fills your view. Depending on one's perspective and what's going on here, there's also another word sort of capturing that phenomenon. We call it tunnel vision. Right? There's certainly a lot of vision involved moving forward, but there's also a tunnel of sorts. But now you're through, and here comes the light. Lots of it, actually. You will feel it quite literally standing here in the spotlight, but I believe you will also feel how your work comes into new light as you share it with others and have conversations about it. And you most certainly will light this place up with your brilliant ideas and your energy and your passion. And we're all looking forward to it. But as for things coming to an end, this is formally actually my last day here as rector. Tomorrow, the current leadership team with Maria Göransdotter, Monica Lind Karlsson, Damien Horst, and myself will be transitioning into other roles here at UID. We'll all be staying, so don't worry about that part. But our mandate period is coming to an end, and we came to a point where we needed a time out from the daily dealings with the university politics that are many times at odds with what we make this place, what this place really is and what we want it to become. But it's been an amazing time, and I think the collaborative effort and experience that we've been through will continue to influence for many, many years to come. And on a day like this, it's quite obvious, thankfully, that while university politics might have been a great part of my daily life for some years now, it will never be what defines what this is. Because this is what defines us, right? Design. By coming together, engaging in what it is and what we want it to become. It's not about the small frames, but the big pictures, and about sharing the experiences and cultivating these new ideas about what we want to develop together. And not the least, it's about coming together and having a really good time, which is what we're about to do now. So we have a very exciting program ahead of us, 2 lovely days. And I'm super excited to say that we will open with a very special guest, one of special importance, I would say, to the way we think and do design here at UID. When we're asked about what makes us special, we often tell stories about how our students not only learn from us who work here, but probably as much from each other and from the experience they have as they travel the world working in different contexts. And our school wouldn't be what it is without this constant and organic influence of ideas from all over the world. And in this sense, actually, there are many people around the world who are, in very concrete ways, involved in this education. And throughout this flow of people and ideas, there are a few places that stand out, that has had a continuous and lasting impact. And one of them is IDEO. And so in fact, this is one of those moments where we can't tell, but have to show you what we mean.
Hi Tim, I'm Sheila. I've been at IDEO Palo Alto since I graduated in 2014. Welcome to Sweden.
Hi, I'm Jorge. Welcome team. I graduated from the design school in 2007. I was at IDEO from 2007 to the end of 2008 in the Bay Area.
I am Amit. I graduated in 2012 and I work in San Francisco office.
Hi, my name is Bodo.
I'm Mike.
I'm Nikolai. We're all interaction designers at IDEO Palo Alto.
We graduated last year.
And I will graduate next year.
Hi guys, I'm Carlos.
I'm Lou.
I'm Camilla.
We're saying hi from Chicago office.
Stina Jonsson, graduated 2008, spent 4.5 years at IDEO Chicago and 4.5 years at IDEO London.
Hi, my name is Vivian. I graduated in 2013 and I work in the New York studio.
Hi team, my name is Fabrizio. I graduated in the class of 2008 and I worked at IDEO for 4 years in San Francisco, Chicago, and Munich.
Hi Tim, my name is Thais Mock. I graduated UID in 2016 and I was an intern at IDEO Cambridge.
Hi Tim, I'm Migle and I graduated 2 years ago. And I was an intern at IDEO Palo Alto in the summer 2015.
Hi, I'm Ivan, first year Agni student, and at the beginning of August I'm starting my internship in IDEO San Francisco.
Hi Tim, my name is James. I graduated from the Industrial Design Intensive program in 2016 and I will be joining the IDEO Chicago office.
Hi Tim, my name is Joachim. I did an internship at IDEO Palo Alto last year.
Hey, I'm Martijn and I graduated in 2017 and I interned in IDEO San Francisco.
Hi, I'm Melissa and I'm going to graduate 2019 and I went to IDEO San Francisco.
Hey Tim, this is Daria Wendell.
And I'm Susanne Dussold.
And we both graduated 2017 from the Advanced Product Design program.
And now we are both located in the Munich office.
Hi, I'm Eli. I will graduate in 2020 and I was at IDEO Chicago last year and I will join again this summer.
Hi, this is Reggie. I've graduated UID in 2011 and 2016 and I've interned at the Munich office in 2010 and at the Boston office in 2014.
Hey Tim, it's Matthias. I graduated in 2016, then I started working in Palo Alto and now I'm in Munich.
Hey, my name is Jost Sievert and I graduated from UID in 2016 and I worked at IDEO Palo Alto.
I'm Miha. I graduated from interaction design in 2011. Used to be IDEO London, now I'm IDEO San Francisco.
Hi Tim, my name is Julia and I graduated from UID in 2016 and I was in the Chicago studio in 2014.
Hi Tim and everyone else up there for the design talks. I'm Jen Sarah Charby, Interaction Design class of 2012. I joined IDEO in Cambridge in 2011 and just recently left. Tim, I'm so glad you made it and that you'll get to see the direct impact that IDEO is having on this community. And if you're curious about what's in the background, yes, it is from my Peru collection.
Hi, I'm Lena. I'm graduating UID this year and I tried learning Embracing Ambiguity as an intern in IDEO Chicago in 2016.
Hi Tim, my name is Andre. I interned at the Boston office last year.
Hi, my name is Piotr. I was interning at IDEO Palo Alto for 7 months in 2017.
Hi, I'm Yue.
I was interning in IDEO Munich for 4 months in the end of 2016, and then I flew to San Francisco and was interned there for 6 months at the beginning of 2017.
I'm Siri. I graduated in 2014, spent 1 year in the San Francisco and Palo Alto offices, and then 2 years in London.
This is Don. I'm a 2013 graduate, and I have been working at IDEO Chicago since 2014. Be careful with the sauna.
Hi, I am Linus, and I had the good pleasure of being in the Munich office back in 2012. I'm currently working for another Tim over in Cupertino, California, and I'm sending you some sunshine for the degree show, so all the best and enjoy Tim's talk.
Please welcome Tim Brown.
Well, it's loud. Maybe we should just change the name from IDEO to Umio. Seems like it would be more appropriate. I knew we had quite a few folks from here who joined us, but I had no idea it was quite that many. I think we'll have to go look at the data, but it may turn out that Umio has been the most influential school on IDEO of any, certainly for one that's your size. So thank you very much for sending so many incredible people to us. So we're actually going to spend most of the time having a little conversation on stage with some of the students, because I find that more interesting than standing up and talking about things that I've done in the past. But I thought I'd just do a quick introduction to what IDEO is up to these days, just for those of you who don't know anything about IDEO, or maybe who've seen little bits of what we do, and just to kind of give you a bit of a perspective. I've always only been interested in a couple of things through most of my career. One of them is the question, what does design do next? It's a question I've been asking since I was a student at design school, and I continue to ask today, and it's driven my thinking around how to keep exploring the question of what kinds of problems should designers be tackling, or might we tackle at IDEO. And so I thought I'd give you a quick survey of some of the kinds of questions that we've been tackling recently in a sort of generic sense. So some things that we're working on, or have been working on for the last few years. I'm going to fly through this pretty quickly. I'm interested, another thing that I'm interested in is systems rather than just things. I trained as an industrial designer, like many of you. I was never a very good industrial designer, to be honest with you. And I found myself interested in the world in which things existed and the systems that supported things. And I think fortunately today, as designers, we're getting asked to contribute to the design of systems in all kinds of interesting ways. One of those systems that we've gotten interested in recently is this one. It feels like it's quite an important one that's being threatened in a lot of places, not least in the country that I live in the US. So recently we've been redesigning the voting system for the county of Los Angeles, which if it was a country would be, I think, within the top 10 countries in the world. It's huge. Millions and millions of people vote every election, and we've been trying to update that, particularly with a view to being as embracing of people with different abilities and capabilities as possible. I think there are something like 40 different languages that the system has to be able to operate in, because there are so many people from different nationalities who live in Los Angeles. So anyway, so we've been working on designing democracy. I think many of you here, both from companies and students, are interested in this topic of mobility. So are we. One of our largest clients these days is Ford Motor Company. The guy there on the left is an old friend of mine that I've worked with. He used to be my boss, actually, because he was the CEO of Steelcase. And for those of you who don't know, there was a while in which IDEO was part of the Steelcase family. Not anymore, but Jim Hackett was my boss when I was the CEO of IDEO, and he was the CEO of Steelcase. Now he's the CEO of Ford, and we're getting to think about mobility with one of the largest, world's largest automobile companies. Beyond, well, not actually, we're not worrying about the vehicles so much themselves, but about the way people move around cities. We've been interested in that topic for a long time. Some of you may have seen a little project that we put up on the web starting a couple of years ago called Automobility, where we've been exploring the use states for autonomous vehicles. I think this was a very kind of crude early look at some of those things. I think it'll get a lot more interesting over time as we start to discover both the potential of this technology, but also the failings of this technology. I think it's going to have many more interesting qualities than we quite appreciate right now. So that's mobility. We're interested in food systems, particularly in developing countries. You may or may not know, we, as well as IDEO, the core company, we have a non-profit version of IDEO, IDEO.org, that works about 60% of its time in Africa, the rest of the time in the United States and other parts of the world. Food systems is one of the areas that we work on a lot. We also work in China on food systems, where food safety is a big issue. We helped launch one of the first organic farm-to-table restaurants, restaurant chains in Canada, where, in China, where I just came from Canada, that's why. So, where the company has their own farms where they grow the food, and then these fast kind of casual restaurants in which they serve it and sell the food. And one of the interesting things there was this was a startup, helped build this company and build in the culture around food, so that, for instance, every worker that belongs to the company goes and visits the farms so that they understand where this food comes from, even if they're working in a restaurant in Shanghai. More and more our work involves not just designing the things or the services or the experiences that companies put out into the world, but the organizations themselves. This happened a long time ago. In fact, Jim Hackett, who I showed before, was one of the first CEOs to come to IDEO and say, you know, I'm interested in the things that you design, but I'm actually much more interested in you helping us become a more innovative company. And we worked with Steelcase for a long time on that problem. Now we work with many kinds of organizations. One that we've been working with more recently is a little bit closer to here. It's a company called Zalando. Some of you, I don't know if any of you use Zalando. It's an online retail, clothing retail company, a sort of competitor to Amazon. And what we were really helping them do is establish for themselves, they're a relatively young company, but they didn't really understand what their purpose was. And so we helped them understand what that purpose was and express it to themselves and learn for themselves what it was that they wanted to be about in the world. And ultimately their stated purpose is to reinvent fashion for the good of all. And it's interesting because the data shows that, and we collect data from a lot of different organizations. We actually have a tool, a kind of an analysis tool that we use to actually understand what the creative qualities, we believe that these 6 creative qualities are really important ones, how they show up in different organizations. And it turns out that companies that have these qualities, but also have a strong sense of purpose, outperform the stock market by 300%. So they're far more successful as businesses when they have strong creative capacities and a strong sense of purpose. And it doesn't take a genius to figure out why that would be the case, right? Because if you have a strong sense of purpose, then you're far more likely to get an alignment around innovation that's going on in the firm. It's far more likely that people who are having ideas that are going to help move the company forward if they understand what the purpose of that organization is. So we're spending more of our time these days helping these companies either establish that purpose if they've maybe lost it. More often it's about re-articulating it so that they can share it more successfully with their own employees. And I don't know what it is like in Europe, but in America, the statistics for employee engagement are truly terrible, right? I mean, less than 30% of the workforce in America is actually engaged while they're at work, which is, I mean, it's disastrous, really. I mean, it's no wonder that companies struggle to innovate or they struggle to thrive if only 30% of the people that work in your company actually care about what they do. So purpose is important. I mean, this is a slightly kind of inflated thing to say, but genuinely in some cases, I believe we're getting to work with organizations in such a way that we're actually affecting economies, and which is very exciting. In this particular case, we work with one company in Peru that's 3% of the GDP. So that's quite a lot, actually. If any economists in the audience know, the company that's 3% of the GDP is huge. I mean, to be 3% of the American GDP would be, I don't know there's no company that even comes close. Even Walmart does not come close to being that impact on the GDP of the US. So this little company has decided that its purpose is to reignite the middle class, the emerging middle class in Peru. And to do that, they've built many interesting, they built a bank and retail, But the problem that they asked us to help to take on in the first thing that we did with them was to redesign the Peruvian school system and to create actually a competitor for the government school system, which I know would be an outrageous thing to do here in Sweden, but it turns out in Peru it's actually necessary. To design a school system that was very high quality, scalable, and low cost. And by low cost, it's about $110 a month per student, which is less expensive than the American school system costs to run. It's private, and these schools we got to are now being built across Peru. We were very fortunate. We have a team that focuses on design for education. And we got to design the schools, the campuses, the technology, the business model, the teacher training system, the curriculum, everything to do with the school system. Designed new kinds of classrooms, brought a blended learning model which uses technology, online education and classroom education, and launched the schools about 4 years ago. We've built over 40 schools now, 50,000 students, 2,500 teachers, and the most interesting statistics is that the quality of the school is that they're outperforming the national averages by 3 times in mathematics and literacy. So they've been quite successful, and we're now about to launch the same school system in Mexico and hopefully across Latin America. So this kind of project, I believe, genuinely has an impact on the economy of a country, right? I mean, changing, but I forgot to mention, when we started this work, Peru was at the very bottom of all of the education rankings, the global education rankings. Hopefully this system will help make a dent on that. We're getting asked more and more to help countries think about the way they can use design to affect their role in the world. And we just last month, we launched a new joint venture with the government of Dubai to look at, as it says here, unlocking the power of generosity, curiosity, and creativity to improve people's lives in the Middle East. Really as a kind of an antidote to radicalism. Looking at how can creativity and design, when it's applied to things like the lives of teenagers, the lives of the elderly population, the future of government services, how can that affect the culture of a whole country? So we're getting to ask some really interesting questions and do some very interesting projects with the team in Dubai. I find the questions that I get as I travel around the world more and more from organizations, from CEOs these days is not only do I build a culture that supports innovation, but how does my leadership and our leadership have to evolve? How does it have to change in order to support being more creative? And so we find ourselves talking a lot about that. We recently launched our own online university, not to compete with Umeå. We're not trying to teach the practice of design, but we are trying to teach a little bit about design thinking. And one of the courses that we run there is on creative leadership. We also just launched a new program with Tsinghua University, which is the top university in China, in Beijing, teaching the CEOs of Chinese companies about creative leadership. It's very interesting. It's a very unique opportunity to be able to work at a kind of a national scale with one of a top university and to introduce, this is the first cohort here of, this is the first cohort of CEOs of these companies. And they spend a year on this program learning about creative leadership and design thinking. So we're hopeful that we'll start to kind of maybe educate these leaders to think more creatively. And then finally, I thought this is for those of you who were at the party last night. I thought, I had to put this project in because sometimes people forget that we started as a product design company, and I haven't really shown very many products here. We still do design some products. We love designing products, but we just love designing other things as well. But we were at the Guitar Museum last night, and there were lots and lots of Fender amplifiers around. So I couldn't resist but put this one in, because we also design amplifiers for Fender. And this is a lovely little guitar amp that we designed a couple of years ago for them. And we still love designing objects and products that are culturally relevant. And there's nothing much more culturally relevant than rock music, at least not if you live in the USA anyway. So there is a little kind of quick run through of some of the kinds of projects that we've been doing for the last few years. At IDEO. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of background. And now comes the much more interesting bit, which is talking with students. So I think we're gonna sit up here and we're gonna discuss some questions or something. Yeah? Okay, cool. All right. All right. Thanks for the furniture moving, Damien. Good job. You have a second career in front of you if you ever lose your job as a design professor. Cool. All right, guys, where do you want to sit? Do you have a seating plan in mind? Free seating plan? All right. Shall I sit in the middle here? Okay. Oh, now I'm staring right into the projector. Great. Perfect. I already grabbed mine. I was very selfish. Sorry.
My name is Sofia, and I'm from Stockholm, and I graduate from the bachelor program in industrial design.
I am Nicolas Torreta. I'm from Brazil. I'm a PhD candidate here, and I still have quite many years to go before I graduate.
My name is Lena. I graduated the bachelor program a couple of years ago, and today I'm graduating the interaction design program as well. And I come from northern Norway, the beautiful city of Tromsø in the Arctic. And we're so happy to have this opportunity to have a conversation with you today. And we would like the audience to also think of things that you would like to ask Tim. And we would like it to be an organic exploration of the future of design today and the design of today. Yeah. And we're going to start with a question from Nicolas.
Well, it's just a curiosity that we had looking at like the things that you were presenting. You talk a lot about like the interdisciplinary and multifaceted nature of design, and we would like to know what does that mean for you?
Well, I mean, to be honest, it's almost hard to describe for me because it's a bit like a fish in water. We've always been interdisciplinary at IDEO since we founded the company. I mean, when we first made, I mean, we're 40 years old this year. This is our 40th anniversary, not under the brand IDEO. That didn't appear until much later, but the original company, and that founded by David Kelly, and that was some designers and some engineers. And then when we made IDEO, we brought together social scientists and designers and engineers and business people. So we've been interdisciplinary right from the beginning. I mean, for us, design was always a way of operating, a way of thinking, but you didn't actually necessarily have to be a professional designer in order to do it. I happened to go to design school. I'm much like this one, not quite as nice as this one, but it was much like this one. And so I've got this sort of similar background to you guys, but many of my colleagues come from completely different backgrounds. But and so it's hard for me to imagine being in a world that isn't multidisciplinary. It's hard to imagine tackling the kinds of problems that we tackle without it. But I would say the one thing we've realized over time as we've grown, and you know, now we have over 700 people and come from many, many different backgrounds, that to hold that together, you do have to have some things that are shared, right? And so there are really two things that we share at IDEO that are kind of hold it together. One is we do all use a design approach, right? So even if somebody comes with a background in food science or in as an entrepreneur or whatever, the approach we take to problem solving is based on design. So we use a human-centered, design-based approach to problem solving. So we all use that, right? We might bring other experiences to it, and we might have particular skills that we have, like finite element analysis if you're an engineer, or social science and anthropology if you're a researcher, but we all use the same methodology, the same one that I think you learn here, right? The second thing is we have a set of values that are really important to us, some of which are shared, I think, by all creative organizations, some which are not necessarily shared with all organizations, which are very important to us. So those two things, the kind of values and methodology, allow us to be very, very diverse in our backgrounds. I'm getting good at passing.
Yeah, it's great. It's collaboration here.
Yeah, exactly.
To kind of build on the things that you were talking about, this multidisciplinary, and that we are all representing kind of different disciplines coming together and creating design. This year, we started the interaction design program. The first day, we were discussing what interaction design really is. And what we found was that we didn't really leave with a concrete answer of what it could be, because everyone had a different understanding of what interaction design meant to them and how it applied to them and how they are designers. So it led to kind of a bigger discussion that I've had with peers over the past year, how these titles that we are supposed to fit into when we are applying for a job doesn't necessarily show the true potential that many of us have. So my question to you is, can titles kind of inhibit design and collaboration because we are defining us within these silos?
Yes, of course they can, but they're also useful.
Yes.
Because I think to collaborate, well, so it depends, right? I mean, but if you're collaborating with people for the first time, and I mean, in many instances in the world outside in business, you do find yourself in a situation where you're collaborating with people for the first time, then you need a starting point, I think, to know, one, who might be the right people to ask to assemble into a team, and or how do you start the creative conversation, and at least having an understanding of each other's discipline gives you a starting point for that collaboration. The truth is, at least in our world anyway, the invitation is to extend well beyond that, and the collaboration becomes whatever it needs to be in order to be successful. And my experience is certainly that teams at IDEO who've worked together for a long time, you can't even tell. I mean, I often can't even tell what discipline people. I don't even know very often what discipline people came from. And so it's sort of it's an entry card maybe to the collaboration, but it's not actually the recipe for collaboration. So I think you just have to see it as that in a way. And I mean, I suspect that, you know, for any of you that that are graduating from here, that you've got a lot of shared experiences and a lot of shared knowledge, and a few things that are a little bit special, either to you as an individual or to the particular course that you took. I mean, my own view is that today there's never been more overlap between the disciplines of design, right? Because so much. I mean, what we used to think of as interaction. When I first discovered interaction design, it was when my mentor Bill Mogridge had coined the term just 2 years before, right? I mean, I joined him in 1987. He coined the term, I think, in 1985. And it was a difference between something digital and something not digital, right? And I was trained as an industrial designer where we knew things were going to be digital, but we didn't actually affect the digital piece of it. And so it was a pretty clear distinction, right? I mean, and we used to talk a lot about what was different and new about interaction design then, but now everything has got that associated with it. So everything is interaction design at some level. I mean, I remember teaching interaction design at the Royal College of Art, maybe that was about another 10 years later, so in the mid-90s. Basically, I was predicting that in the end, interaction design would be all design. And to some degree, that is exactly what's coming true. We might not call it interaction design, but it's kind of what's coming true. Everything, it's almost impossible to imagine something that doesn't have some digital influence somewhere.
Exactly, and that's what we've seen this year too in some of the graduating projects, and also I've seen it in my peers in the way that they've developed their skill set. So I feel like the lines are getting so diffused, and we're having so problems defining
Maybe
ourselves.
we can just get back to calling everybody designers.
Exactly,
and
that was what I was getting to. Let's finish the discussion today.
Yeah, maybe that's where we get to. Yeah.
So the next question is, what are your thoughts on the designer's role and responsibility?
My view on that is designers have to, I mean, design is by its nature intentional, right? I mean, there's no such thing as accidental design. There might be design where we have unintended consequences, but design by its very definition is intentional. You know, I mean, I think of my definition for design is the one that Herbert Simon, the Nobel laureate, wrote about in his book on artificial intelligence back in the 1950s, which basically, and I'm summarizing, but it's basically whenever we shape the world to meet our needs, so we're designing, right? So design obviously covers a lot of territory when you take that discipline, but it's intentional, right? Because we're shaping the world to meet our needs, right? We're not letting the world accidentally get there. That's nature, right? And nature does a good job of shaping the world to meet its needs, but design is intentional, and therefore we have to take responsibility for its outcome. Now, you know, there are a lot of other things that affect what we can design, and so we're not the only ones who are responsible for what, but we have to take responsibility. I personally, I think it's less about sort of legal responsibility, although there's plenty of that. I think it's about a moral responsibility, and particularly I think about it more as a moral responsibility to go back and do it again if we don't get it right the first time. It's I think it's a mistake to think about design as having so much responsibility that you have to get it perfectly right, because we never do, and that dilemma becomes one that just creates inaction, which I think is a problem. So I'd rather we see design as giving us the moral responsibility to go back and improve it and over time and get it right. It's another reason why I believe that we're moving into an exciting and important new phase for design as more and more of the systems that we're designing are sort of responsive systems. In other words, they are now in a state where they learn about themselves and they can adapt over time. Because we're moving to a world perhaps in which design is never done, right? The things that we start to shape continue to maybe shape themselves, or we as designers continue to influence them over time, which I think is a good thing. So it gives us a chance to keep improving things. But yeah, we do have a moral responsibility.
So thinking about the responsibility of the designer, and you show that you've been, like, IDEO has been operating very different contexts and going between like projects with our product design to educational systems. Can a designer, and if a designer can, what does the designer need to operate between these different contexts?
Really good teams. I mean, no individual designer can possibly move across in my view, those contexts alone and have anything like the kind of capacity to understand context and history and have the expertise as well as the freshness of thought that is required to tackle that broad set of problems. One can only do it with the right collaborators, and it's why you know my approach and our approach at IDEO has always been the idea that design is a collaborative activity, not an individual activity. And there's a tension there. I realize, and it is very difficult because we need each of us to be creative contributors. We need each of us to feel like we've got some ability to shape the outcome of what we work on and to take responsibility for that. But I see no way that we can possibly encompass that range of work and problem without thinking of it as a collaborative activity. And we've set up IDEO specifically to be that way. We're not interested in working as individuals. We don't work as individuals. There's nobody who ever gets to work on a project on their own at IDEO, unless it may be designing some tiddly little thing for themselves, right? I mean, actually, it's true. A lot of designers at IDEO do go in the workshops of the weekend to design their own furniture so they can design something for themselves, because otherwise they don't get to. But I just think it's necessary. And I realize not all designers think that way, and that's fine. But it's the way we've chosen to approach it.
Thank you. Hi, Tim. Thank you
Hi.
for yesterday. Nice to talk to you and your wife. I was thinking while you were talking here that, okay, we know we move between different culture contexts, for example. What happened with the aesthetics and collaboration? And how do you work with aesthetic when you also involve people from different culture contexts? And then we know that we educate, for example, here, we have mostly a particular kind of aesthetics, product semantics, for example. But how do you bring these things together? How I know it's a very big question.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I like to think that collaboration can have its own aesthetic, if you like. Yeah. I mean, you know, for instance, when you're designing a school system, you know, what's the aesthetic of a teacher training program? I don't know, but it's like it's not the same as the aesthetic of the school buildings themselves, right? I mean, you know, we certainly, when we work in other cultural contexts, for instance, on that team we had local Peruvians working with us, which helps us not impose a set of cultural and aesthetic assumptions from the outside. But the truth is, as designers, we do that all the time. I hope we try and do that with some level of sensitivity. It helps to be working in parts of the world which are often incredibly inspirational aesthetically. I mean, we've done a lot of work in the Congo, for instance, in Africa. It's one of the hardest countries in the world to work. But the delight and imagination that comes from the aesthetics of the local context is just wonderful, right? And you know, as long as one treats that with respect and not be overly naive about it, I mean, it's very easy to be naive about it, then it leads to solutions that we would never have come up with if we'd just been working in a studio in California or in Europe. So I think it's, I don't know. I mean, I guess I would say the level of open-minded curiosity that we have around everything to do with design. I mean, that's if you like taking that ethnographic approach to studying what people need, also leads you to, I think, a point of view about aesthetics as well, which I hope is sensitive to the context that we're designing for. I mean, I realize the easiest thing to do, and sometimes the most impressive thing to do, is to impose your own aesthetic on the solution, right, and have that be the thing that you leave behind. And I don't particularly object to that, except for when things are out of place. I mean, I live in one of the places. I have an apartment in New York. My wife and I have an apartment in New York, and it's very close to the World Trade Center. And there's a new building there by Santiago Calatrava, and it's at one level it's wonderful. This Calatrava's buildings are wonderful, except it's badly built. But it looks so out of place in New York. It has absolutely no connection to. It literally looks like somebody's dropped an alien spacecraft into the World Trade Center. Maybe that's a good thing. I don't know, but it's his aesthetic imposed on a city. It could have been anywhere in the world, and it would have just been a Calatrava, right? And I don't know whether at some level I enjoy that, but at another level I think it's too easy.
Thank you very much, and I love to have a project with students and staff together with you and IDEO about this.
Oh, I hope we can do that.
Super interesting. Thank you very much.
So now we have a microphone, right? Yeah. So if someone wants to ask questions, we can just use that one.
I'll be careful with that. I used one of those once thing at a conference I was at, and I threw it so hard that I broke the glasses of the lady I hit. So be careful. It was very embarrassing. They were very nice glasses as well.
I was thinking of a question there. Yeah, that's
Okay.
just the microphone got there.
If you could chuck it that far, you'll get a job with the San Francisco 49ers. Okay.
Hi. Hello, everybody. You cannot see me. So I'm actually graduating 2 years ago. I graduated 2 years ago from interaction design program, and my name is Jiao Jiao. So my question to Tim, that has been a question in my mind for a couple of years, is how do you see design thinking is driving to a better design solution as well? So say how to prove using design thinking would give a better design solution. How do you see the relationship between these two?
Not quite sure I know how to answer that, because for me, design thinking is just a way of describing what design is. Therefore, it's the same thing. And so I don't see how, and so that's one thing. Second thing is, you can never prove that design is going to lead to a better solution until you actually do it. Right? I mean, it's one of the challenges we have as designers. That anything that we do that previously there's nothing that's ever been proven scientifically to be true that you haven't, unless you've created it, right? So all of science goes and looks at the world that exists and proves that it's true, right? But if we're doing something new, we're creating something new, you can't possibly can't possibly prove in advance that it's going to be good, right? It's one of the dangers we have in the world of design, particularly in business, when we're trying to make a case for what we do, is that often what business people like to do is prove in advance that what they're doing is going to be the best, right? And that's okay when you're looking essentially at extrapolating from the past, but that's not what we as designers do. So I think it's a little dangerous sometimes to get into the language of how do we prove things are going to be true. I think we can show evidence after we've done them, right? And I think we can show evidence that when we apply design methods and we apply design processes well, we have deeper understanding of users, we understand their needs better, we fulfill those needs better, we get better loyalty from users, we get a bunch of other outcomes. But you can only do that after the fact. You can only do that once you've actually done the work. And I think that's why, as designers, we do need to take responsibility for following our work, right? And for going and understanding how effectively we did the job. It can be a bit tempting sometimes to move on to the next project and forget what we did and let it sort of kind of go exist in the world. And I think we have a responsibility to go and follow on. I think one of the things you were kind of asking about, and I'm guessing here, so I apologize, but is that when we open design up to people who aren't trained as designers, do we get a better result? And that was one of my, certainly one of the things that got me interested in the term design thinking was to kind of break open design and have it be kind of accessible to more people as an approach to creative problem solving. And the truth is that, what you all very well understand, because you're all trained as designers and have done many, many projects, the problem with design and design thinking is one of mastery, right? It's not a conceptual problem, right? We can experience design for the first time and have a sense of what it is, but it's only when we've done it many, many times that we start to develop the sensibilities that really allow us to perform at the highest possible level. And so, I'm interested in how we get a broader and broader set of people in the world to be able to embrace and use design methods and to reach that level of mastery, not necessarily only by going through an institution like this. Because the reason why I think it can't only be through institutions like this is it's a mathematical problem, which is the need in the world out there for good design solution far outweighs the number of designers that we can train. I mean, I don't know what it's like here in Europe, but in America, this is a few years ago, we were training about 1,500 master's students in design per year, compared to 150,000 MBAs a year, right? And so if we're going to have designers affect all of business, we've got a bit of a numerical mismatch in terms of how many designers we're creating. And so I don't see us solving that problem by building a few thousand design schools, although I'd love that to be the case. I think we're going to solve the problem by having other people embrace design methodologies.
So trying to kind of put together this idea of responsibility and of opening up design for people who are not trained as a designer, how would you compare, let's say, a group of people trained as a designer working on a project versus a group of people who were not trained as designers working on a similar project using, let's say, a design thinking toolkit or some kind of methodology? As like, it's something that IDEO is very famous also about doing this kind of toolkits and packaging things up. How would you compare these two situations?
So it's case by case, I guess. But you know, what you get, I would like to think that if you guys tackle the design problem, or we at IDEO tackle a design problem, the level of sophistication of the solution might be higher, right? We might be able to move faster. We might be able to think further out into the future, which I think is one of the challenges that people who first kind of discover design thinking, and maybe you can even remember this when you were kind of earlier on in your student careers, it's like really hard to go very far into the future. But the more facile, the more able you get with the skills of design, the more you're able to project forward. Right? So that's one of the things that I think high caliber design teams can do. Having said that, what you get when you have people who may be embracing design thinking for the first time or early on, who come from other parts of the organization, is they take that excitement and energy back into the pieces of the organization that they come from, that we don't get to go as designers, right? We don't get to go into the talent department, the HR department, or the logistics departments, or whatever, because that's not where we live, right? It's not what we do. And so the benefits you get by having other folks embrace these methods is they take that back into their world, and it makes a difference, right? Sometimes it makes a difference at really large scale, and that's a benefit. So for me, it's not either or. It's like they both produce different benefits, and therefore I think it's a good reason to support both of them. Nice. Right. Suddenly we've got lots of hands shooting up. Excellent.
Flora?
Hey. Hi, team. I have a question. Let's say I know many friends who now join the biggest social network platform. They're well trained. They're all acting to do good, but that social platform sort of didn't go the right way. There's people arguing there's a wrong use of data that might be quite not ethical. And I think design thinking in recent years might have been missing the opportunity to have impact on ethics and driving governance of systems, and meaning to question in schools we should reintroduce probably system thinking and ethics. But what is the case in IDEO when clients ask you to engage in thinking and problem in platforms that could easily create addiction or very misuse of data?
No. Good question. Don't have a good answer. In the sense that, I don't know that we have a hard and fast set of rules about what we would and wouldn't do. I mean, like everybody else, we've been learning pretty fast. I mean, it's easy to look back now and say, okay, there are these business models which are fundamentally flawed to some level, right? I mean, that make addiction highly beneficial in terms of the business model. Fortunately, most companies don't operate on that business model. I mean, it's a relatively small number of them, but I don't know that we thought about it as flawed until it became obvious that it was. It took a while, and I don't blame designers more than anybody else, particularly for not seeing that coming, maybe. But a lot of it is based on the business model. I mean, you can have you can have digital social networks, for instance, which are not based on advertising, where there's not necessarily a benefit to addiction, and therefore you can design something different. I mean, one of the responses we made at IDEO was, you and I talked about this last night, but was that we decided we had to understand the problem more deeply and be able to affect not just the design outcome, but to some degree the technology itself. And so we brought a team of data scientists into IDEO last year so that we could begin to understand how do we design these algorithms in a way that's genuinely human-centered, with a view not to necessarily designing artificial intelligence, but what we would call augmented intelligence, that are extending the abilities and capabilities of human beings rather than replacing them. Now, we're a long way from understanding what that means. It sounds really great, and I believe that it's worth exploring, but we're a long way from understanding what that really means. One thing we have found, though, already, is that when you take data scientists and you put them in front of users instead of just data sets, then they have insights that they wouldn't otherwise have had about how to use data, right? So, anybody in the room is a data scientist? I'm guessing not. No good. Okay. I don't have to worry about insulting anybody. But if you're a data scientist in one of these big tech companies, you spend most of your time, like essentially in the engine room of the company. You're using data sets to figure out what can you take from that data and do that's useful with it. But so many of the insights about how best to use data come from understanding the people that data might be about. And we as designers know how to go and understand people, right? That's what we train to do. And so by teaming designers up with data scientists and going and looking at how people might use data in a medical situation or a safety situation, wherever it might be, you can perhaps begin to understand how to then design algorithms and the systems around them in order to really meet the needs of the people, rather than just simply exploit the data. And I think that's the starting point. At least that's where we've chosen to start. And I hope that ultimately that we will get to solutions that make use of this technology in a way that's genuinely useful. But we're really early on in that journey, so I don't know. Whether we should be as designers standing up and saying we should not work on things that might be addictive, I don't know. That's a tough one. I've generally taken the point of view that where possible, I would prefer to engage with companies and try and get them to educate them about different ways to think and use my skills as a designer to influence businesses rather than just walk away from them and not work with them. But I think each of us has to make our own choice about how we do that. In some cases, that choice might be to come up with a better idea and maybe launch it even as a company. Who knows?
Yeah. Anyone else? Yeah.
Yes. Hi, Tim. This is Marek. I don't know whether you are planning to retire, but in case you are, what would you like to learn or experience in your life in the next years?
It's hard to give up on the amount of learning that I get to do as in my role today. I mean, one of the reasons I am doing what I'm doing is because, as you can perhaps see from the work, I mean, I love learning about new things, and I get to learn about new things all the time at IDEO. My wife, who sat here in the front row, has been over the last few years learning how to be a weaver, and I'm very jealous of her learning how to be a weaver. So maybe I'll ask her to teach me how to be a weaver in my retirement. Although I'd be nothing like as good as her because she's got a lot more patience than I have. But so that wouldn't be a bad thing to learn how to do. But I don't know, actually. I don't think I want to give up the kind of learning that I get to do today. I'm happy to give up being the CEO of IDEO. That's easy. I don't need to do that forever. But I don't want to give up being a designer.
Thank you.
Hi, Tim. I'm Ilterish. I graduated from Advanced Product Design 2 years ago in here. And I wanted to ask you about your opinion about what will be the relationship between AI and a designer at an individual level, maybe.
Well, I guess we were just touching on it a moment ago. I mean, I do think that I mean, clearly, I mean, designers are going to get asked to work on many things. I've always seen the role of the designer to be to help create that layer that is between human beings and the world that human beings occupy. And so I'm not that interested in working on things that take human beings out of the picture, that kind of automate them away. And so I hope that we can find ways of using this technology to create smarter, learning-based systems that can make the experience of people better and the capacities of people better. There are lots of things that I would love some AI help with that currently take up a lot of my time, and I'm sure many of you have those things as well. And I hope we can work on some of those things. I think that I have a sort of a kind of philosophical point of view today that we're at this incredibly important moment in time that comes from the fact that we're at the end of, well, we're past the end of the Industrial Revolution. The first, I mean, if you take the World Economic Forum's definition, we're into the fourth Industrial Revolution now. The first three were steam, electrification, and computerization, and the fourth one is all to do with artificial intelligence. But by the time we're now at like Industrial Revolution number 4, many of the societal systems we designed were designed for Industrial Revolution numbers 1, 2, and maybe a little bit of 3, and they're no longer fit for purpose. Or they're not scalable to the point they need to scale today. I mean, if you look at our healthcare systems, our education systems, our mobility systems, they can't scale to the number of people that they need to serve. And so they need to be fundamentally redesigned. A lot of that redesign has to include significant improvements in productivity of these systems. We simply can't afford to use so many people or even in some cases so much technology to deliver a certain outcome for 7, 8, 9 billion people. So for me, the hope for the technology is that it allows us to become more productive and to design the societal systems that we need that have the capacity to serve everybody, right? Including those several billion people who don't have the privilege in living in the kinds of economies and societies that we for the most part live in. So you know, that is for me the next generational challenge, right? Not just for designers, but for business people, for entrepreneurs, for government policymakers, for teachers. We have to redesign these systems, and so I think that's where we need to apply this technology. And I think as designers, we can do two things pretty well, and one is we're quite good at imagining the future, both in a positive sense and a negative sense, and making that future real for people. And I think we should spend as much of our time as we can trying to make that future as real as we can, so people understand its implications. And then the second thing is we're pretty good at standing up for the role of people in a system, right? And we should remember that that's part of our job, is to stand up for the role of people in the system, and think about the role of technology to make those people as empowered and have as good an experience as possible.
Thank you. Oh, okay.
Hi, my name is Noel. I'm currently working as a design director at a technology and a design company in Gothenburg. My question is a little linked to, continuation to what he was talking about, artificial intelligence. But in the case of, designing for the future using technology, designers play one part of the role, really. The other half is actually the people who are the programmers and the developers who are also influencing, what they actually make. And I think in these discussions, a lot of times we tend to forget that they're the ones who actually are making a lot of this happen, at the back level. Where do you see that line blur between the two, the two disciplines, to a certain sense, in terms of responsibility of what the outcome is?
Well, throughout kind of history, there are these sort of forces that act on what gets designed by who, when. And two of those forces are to do with what are the capacity of the tools that we're making that allow people who are not as technologically literate to still affect the technology. And then, secondarily, what is the technical literacy of designers so that they can affect the technology earlier on in its kind of development cycle. And I think, to some degree, we've gone through a period recently where we've begun to rely a little bit too much on the tools being developed to a point where we can use them as designers without having to be super technically literate. And I think that can be that's fine when it comes to operating in the now at scale. So now today, if you want to design for the web, you don't have to be very technically literate because there are a lot of tools out there that you can build on that allow you to design web experiences, mobile experiences, that kind of stuff, without having to be particularly technically literate. But as soon as you start to project into the future, and whether we're talking about AI or we're talking about distributed web, blockchain, and never mind when we start talking about things like biological technologies, which are also coming at us from over the horizon, I think some of us anyway, as designers, have a responsibility to actually get to be reasonably technically literate so that we can work with developers, engineers, whoever it might be, scientists even in some cases, in order to begin to understand and affect the outcomes of these technologies earlier on. We've been experimenting with that a little bit at IDEO. We set up a team 3 or 4 years ago to do exactly that. It's sort of like our own little version of the MIT Media Lab. And we have designers working with technologists and engineers on some pretty early technologies, working with companies as well. Just trying to experiment and prototype with them before they become standardized products so that we can understand them. And I think that's a role that designers can play. I think it's a huge role that academic institutions can play. That part of design research should also be technical research, right? It should be designers, students, professors, whatever it is, collaborating with technical people and doing the kind of research that allows us to explore these implications of this technology. And I think there's been a great tradition of that at design schools historically for a long time, and it's one that we need to keep strong, because I think, again, I said this already, but I think one of the great powers of design is to sort of grab the future and bring it to the present, to begin to imagine the future now rather than wait till we get there. But we can't do that if we don't understand the technology. It comes back to the very first question. We talked about this idea of multidisciplinary and interdisciplinary teams. I think we've got to work together with developers and engineers and not see it as being two siloed activities. And I think as designers, we're foolish if we think we can work on our own on these things and have the level of influence that we want to have.
Yeah, so we're coming towards the end, but maybe we have time for one more question. Yeah.
Hello, check. I graduated from here last year, and I've always wondered since I first heard the phrase design thinking, how that became the realm of design and not any other creative line of work where you decide what things are. Why is it not architect thinking? Why is it not composer thinking? And what would the world look like if all of these CEOs were taught to think like composers? Like, why us?
Great.
Quick question.
We won. We won the race. It's funny. It's an interesting question. Of course, in my own case, and the reason I started using the term, and we obviously did not invent it. It's been around since the 1950s as a term, and actually, in fact, interesting enough, it was architects who first started using the term design thinking. If you go back and look at the history, it was funny. It actually emerged out of some of the architectural theorists like Christopher Alexander and people like that. So we share it with architecture, maybe. In my own case, I just needed a way of explaining to non-designers what it was we did, right? In a way that stopped them thinking, oh, all I can design are things like this or this. you know, or this, right? Nothing wrong with any of these things, but I was trying to explain to people in business that what we did as designers is so much broader than that, that it isn't only about the aesthetics. Anyway, all of this, you know it. And we had a reason to do that, right? Because we had a business to run, and we wanted to get projects, and so we wrote articles and wrote books, and I would say it was just a right place, right time thing, right? And by the way, you know, these cycles, they've been in the past, and there'll be more of them in the future, right? Which was, there was I think a moment, you know, back 15 years ago now, maybe a bit longer, when certainly in America anyway, you know, business was looking for some alternative ways of thinking, and they were beginning to realize that they needed to open their minds up a little bit. And we happened to be talking about design thinking, and it became a term which I think crossed over, you could say, you know, and became popularized. I mean, and you know, what happened. I mean, I don't think it. I mean, it could have been musical thinking or painterly thinking or something else, perhaps. But you know, most musicians and painters don't need to convince business CEOs to hire them, right? But designers do.
My theory of how it happened is that we were just the ones that got into branding first, and
well,
then
that
we
could also
branded
be
ourselves
true.
as the omni creators.
That might be true. That might be true. There is by the way, but there is a difference between, you know, and there are sort of overlapping worlds of creativity and design and design thinking, and I don't think of them as being one and the same thing. As I say, there's a lot of overlap between them, and we talk a lot more perhaps about creativity these days than we did even a decade ago. But I certainly wouldn't in any way claim that designers have a unique perspective on creativity. I think there are many people who have strong and valid perspectives on creativity. But I think designers do understand design pretty well. At least I hope so. Okay, we done?
Thank you so much.
All right, good, thank you. Thanks, guys. Thanks. Thank you.
And now, Tim, we have this tradition that when you're done on stage, you get to sign the wall.
I get to sign the wall.
You
okay.
sign the wall.
All right. Okay. Cool. I haven't written on a chalkboard for a long time.
So now there's time for fika. We'll have coffee and some sweet outside, and we'll join back here at 3 o'clock. Thank you.